G'day guys, Red Celt here, and guess we're going to be going down the path of another Outriders video. It just seems to be the game that I'm enjoying the most lately, so I thought I'd make the most of it. While I'm still new at the game, I have picked up a few tricks that and tips to share, and thought we'd use this chance to start going over the different character classes within the game, doing a video on each just so you can get the general idea if you're looking into playing the game yourselves. You could watch the videos and figure out whether or not you actually want to play the character you want to play beforehand. So with that being said, this will be the video where I will go over the Pyromancer of the game, as it is the most eye-catchy, flashy one that most people know from the game, because fire is such a popular element throughout most media, where almost every show has a fire or game has some form of fire spell or magic or attack. So it's just a fundamental thing that we all know about within our gaming experience so far. But with that being said, with each of the characters in this game will have a passive elemental type that their melee will do, and then they have a secondary passive for healing. For the Pyromancer, obviously the damage is burn damage or fire damage, and that is just your basic form of dot or damage over time. So the higher your level and things like that, the more damage it does over time for a certain period of time. Now, for the healing on the Pyromancer, it is procced whenever you are able to kill an enemy with a skill, which would encourage you to use more skills, increase your cooldowns, and make sure you're using damaging skills instead of skills that are going to more so hinder the enemies, so that you can be proccing your healing and staying alive. So, the other thing within the game is each of the characters' abilities that you can use have an individual type behind the ability. For example, the Pyromancer has 4 different types of attacks that he can do. He has Ignite, which just inflicts a burn with covered burns. Explosive, which is more so a mid-area blast, dealing large amounts of damage. Interrupt, which will stop your enemies from being able to cast their abilities. And Immobilize, which I think most of us can understand what Immobilize is going to do. So each of the characters has, I think it's 10 abilities you're able to choose from, and you can put any 3 of these abilities on for your build. So the abilities and what they do for the Pyromancer goes, your first one that you're able to unlock is Heat Wave. Heat Wave, despite the name, is actually just what most people would consider Firewall. So you launch a wall of fire directly in front of you in the direction you're looking. Anything that touches gets inflicted with burn, while also taking a decent amount of damage, making it so that you're able to just get a large amount of burnout. The next ability you can choose from is Feed the Flames, which is a single target line of sight ability that deals a large amount of damage while healing you for the same amount of damage that it deals. This will also inflict Immobilize onto the enemies and also Interrupt, so they will be unable of casting skills and they will be held in place for a bit, which can be handy if you are taking on larger foes that are hitting you harder than you want. The third ability you have access to is Thermal Bomb. And what that does is it's another single target cast, and it puts a marker on the enemy, which will slowly deal damage to them, and will also inflict Interrupt onto them. Now, if you are to kill the enemy while it is still affected by the marker that this puts on it, It will then explode out, dealing a large amount of damage to all enemies within a small radius. The next ability you get access to after that is Overheat. When you cast Overheat, it deals a small damage over a large area, but it will also deal bonus damage to any enemies that are burned, which feeding into the massive amounts of capability you have to burn as the Pyromancer can lead to you being able to hit larger damage across the whole map consistently. This will also be classed as an explosive and an interrupt ability, so it will stop enemies from being able to cast their abilities if a boss is not if you're struggling with something like Warding Flame, where they make a massive fire tornado that chases you. Just tap the ability during that and they can't use it anymore. Anyway, the next ability that they give you access to is Volcanic Rounds, which most of the classes get an ability like this. It allows you to put your class element onto your gun for the next clip. It will, so for the Pyromancer, it gives you gun bonus, burning bullets until you reload, and the bullets are then able to ignite enemies, allowing you to put more burn status out. The third to last ability that you get is Ash Blast, which inflicts ash on all enemies in a large area, much like your Overheat from earlier, only instead of dealing damage, it inflicts ash, which is the Pyromancer's immobilizers. Essentially a freeze proc to stun the whole field so you can catch your breath or quickly do something. Then we go on to Phaser Beam. Phaser Beam, when I first started using it, I was going to make jokes about a Kamea wave, but it doesn't really fit into the bill so much. It's a small kind of fireball that shoots out. It looks like a fireball, but works like a beam, and it deals a very large amount of damage, doing damage over time to any enemy within a certain range of it, with burn and interrupting all enemies it affects. Now, the final ability that you're able to use with this character is Eruption, which essentially spawns a mini volcano. So I don't think we need to cover using a mini volcano too much. You spawn a mini volcano. So that's pretty much the basics of the Pyromancer, its abilities, and what you can do. So now I thought I would cover some of the things that I've been running on my Pyromancer personally to get some feedback from those who know better, and maybe even help those who are still getting new at the game themselves to be able to have a general idea of something that will at least work for the beginning parts of the game. My Pyromancer is still very low level, and I still have a lot of gear and stuff to get for it, but here's the general idea of what I will be doing and looking for within my Pyromancer. So the abilities that I chose to use for my Pyromancer personally, first of all, I absolutely love Thermal Bomb. It is such a handy ability for handling large amounts of low-level creatures and enemies, because the explosion itself is pretty much a one-shot to most small enemies. And then when you're dealing with some of your bigger enemies, you can actually cast Thermal Bomb onto the smaller enemies, killing them, getting the larger blast damage into the big enemy instead of getting the little damage from the ability itself. And with its small cooldown time, allows for this to happen multiple times throughout one boss engagement, which can really make or break the boss fight. The next ability I chose was Eruption, because, as we covered earlier, spawn a mini volcano. It does so much damage and actually stays out for enough time that there have been times where I've been able to wipe an entire wave of enemies just by casting one Eruption at the right time, and that is something that is undeniably handy. Now, the final ability I chose to go with was Overheat, because I personally don't like being frozen by crawlers and stuff like that, and if you have an Overheat charge available, you can just tap your Overheat and the things can't use their abilities anymore. But that being said, if you do not want overheat, I would easily substitute it out with almost any of the damage dealing abilities such as Phaser Beam and Firewall. Sorry, not Firewall, it's called Heat Wave. I just think of it as a firewall because it's a firewall, not a heat wave. But yeah, those are the abilities I chose to run for my Pyromancer because they're the ones I enjoy. With a lot of games like this, it's not actually about making the best build, but it's about making the best build for you. If you're playing someone else's build, it may not feel comfortable, you may not enjoy it. If you're playing your own and it works, that's what you want. So the next part of the build that is pretty self-explanatory is the abilities or skills that I personally chose. Now, personally, there's only 4 that are essential to my build, which is Grave Explosion for the explosive damage, Phoenix Nesting for the revive, Let It Burn to make burns last longer, and Incinerate. The moment a burn ends, you inflict ash. That is just damage over time and crowd controlling in its finest, so that's what I run. Next up, we have our Pax abilities. So for my Pax ability path, I actually chose Burnt Offering. What this does is it increases the burn duration by 50% while increasing the burn damage by 20%. Now that just allows me to pretty much turn any fire proc into Amaterasu, and who doesn't want to do that? Shout out to any OG Naruto fans out there. So the final thing we're going to talk about is just some mod suggestions and gear suggestions that I've found from looking through what I've done. First of all, the legendary set I run for this build is Heatseek, because as I said, I love my thermal bombs, and to be able to chain them back to back to back is such a fun experience. As for your armor mods, honestly, it's up to the abilities you choose to run mostly, but some that I just generally choose for the Pyromancer itself is Phantom Dash, so that I am able to have more mobility. Anomaly Echo, to be able to increase both my gun power and my anomaly power, to make myself stronger and deal more damage from all sources. And then Twice as Hot to make my burn procs just that little bit more spicy. Then finally, we have our weapon mods. Now, of course, there's the go-to weapon mods that everyone runs. You've got your Nikolai's Revenge, your ultimate Bone Shrapnels, your ultimate Link damages, and just the stuff that fucks up the field all round at the end of the day. But there are still some that I would find help put some synergy into the build that I would suggest using as well, such as ultimate burning bullets on almost any fully automatic weapon to be able to increase the amount of burn procs you have out, volcanic rupture on on any single shot gun to be able to have extra volcanoes spawn, and Firestorm to be able to spawn a homing firestorm that chases enemies inflicting burn procs. Anyway, this is my personal take on how I like to run my Pyromancer. Let me know what you think, and don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, and all the usual jazz. Thank you, and catch you next time.